Well, hello, and thanks for watching another episode of ARFCOM News, your twice-weekly dose of the finest 2A propaganda. Tony Gonzalez is a total scumbag. He's the gun control candidate running against Brandon Herrera for representative for Texas District 23. Gonzalez was censured by the Texas Republican Party for voting in favor of the Bipartisan Gun Control Act of 2022, which is that law which led to the ATF's current attempts to end private sales. To me, he seems like the kind of person who talks in the theater and sits staring at his phone after the light turns green. In my opinion, he's the kind of degenerate who drinks warm milkshakes and eats cold French fries. Oh, and he also likes to go on live TV and make defamatory statements about his opponent.
Bob Good endorsed my opponent, a known neo-Nazi. These people used to walk around with white hoods at night. Now they're walking around with white hoods in the daytime.
You want to see my face? You want to see my face?
No, AK Daddy isn't a fan of the failed Austrian artist with a stupid mustache. Yes, he does make some pretty messed up jokes sometimes.
This, if you can't tell, is the MP40, the original ghetto blaster.
But that's a joke, boy. You missed it. Went right past you. You gotta keep on your toes.
Gonzalez is obviously shook and he's starting to act out desperately. But the harder he tries to hit Brandon, the harder he punches himself right in the face. If you live in Texas District 23, I encourage you to vote early and vote often for Brandon Herrera. But if you live anywhere else in America, please consider donating to Herrera's campaign. Because if Gonzalez gets reelected, you can be assured he will support whatever draconian nonsense the control freaks ask him to, and that will affect you regardless of which state you live in. But it would be impossible for us to produce quality 2A propaganda without sponsors, so let's pay some bills. Today's video is sponsored by Franklin Armory, because anything worth shooting is worth shooting twice, and going binary is your Fed-approved solution. Want reduced split times and tighter groups? With a Franklin Armory binary firing system, you can improve these important shooting metrics and more. Visit franklinarmory.com and gain the selectable option to fire on both the pull and release trigger functions of your semi-automatic firearm today. And by tnvc.com, your source for bespoke, artisanal, non-GMO night vision products expertly forged by Amish craftsmen in the heart of a dying star. And by Hydra. The Mark 15 Hydra is the most versatile black rifle platform the industry has ever seen. The most you will ever need to convert calibers is a barrel, bolt, and magwell. Changing is quick and easy, and the combinations are practically limitless. With just one serialized lower, you can have any configuration you can imagine. Last week I told you the Arkansas Attorney General demanded the ATF turn over body cam video from the surprise pre-dawn raid in which they murdered Brian Malinowski.
Enhance.
It should come as no surprise to anyone with the sense the good Lord gave to a wet bucket of sand. The ATF says there were no cameras. And why would there be? Pesky things like evidence complicate telling your own version of the narrative after you shoot a man in his own home.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove, okay? Here's a scenario.
But some other PewTubers are pointing to an ATF doc on body cameras and claiming the ATF policy required their hit squad to wear a camera during the raid. Except the document some of those folks have been referencing is actually a policy directed at task force members from other organizations who are required by their own agency's policy to wear a camera. And the policy never requires or even encourages the use of a camera. In fact, it focuses more on the situations where task force members are not permitted to record than it does on the circumstances where recording is permitted. What I found more than a little disconcerting is that they are not allowed to record in the presence of, quote, sensitive investigative techniques.
Por favor, no quiero morir.
The very fact that the ATF thinks it is in any way acceptable to even have techniques which are kept secret from the general public is concerning. But this really hints at their use of parallel construction. This is a term used to describe the practice of collecting intelligence unlawfully, then using that intelligence to find evidence through lawful means and search warrants.
But They're supposed to be the good guys.
Now, the funny thing is,
Funny like I'm a clown,
there is a
ain't you?
document out there which details the ATF's policy for its own agents' use of body cams, and it's even referenced in this doc. But it turns out the policy for agents is more or less the same. Agents are not required to wear a camera in any circumstances at all. Like the policy for task force members, the policy for agents only outlines circumstances where they are allowed to record. It devotes much more attention to circumstances when agents are not permitted to record, how to censor videos created by agents, and record-keeping policies. The entire tone of the document is that recording is something the ATF kind of generally frowns upon.
The pattern fits. Leave no witnesses.
One of the interesting bits they want to keep secret is their hand signals. Relax, champ. We already know your hand signals. As always, we have linked our sources down there in the doobly-doo so you can look over the policies for yourself. We will, of course, keep tracking this story and update you as it develops. The Supremes granted certiorari for Garland versus Vanderstock, which is the case regarding homemade guns and the rule the ATF made up to ban them. Although the case is obviously about guns and gun rights, there is actually no Second Amendment argument put forth in the case. The court will rule only on whether the ATF has the regulatory authority to make up rules like this. But in light of recent rulings, there's a real good chance this case will be decided for the light side.
If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny, consume you it will!
Last week, Weekend at Bernie's stopped into a Sheetz gas station to marvel at the squalor us poors live in. On the very same day, his lawyers filed suit against Sheetz for discriminatory hiring practices because they use background checks to screen applicants. Yeah, you heard that right. The Biden administration is claiming in a court of law that a background check is discriminatory. And what else is wild is that the government isn't even claiming that Sheetz was trying to discriminate on racial grounds. They claim that, regardless of intention, Sheetz has violated the 1964 Civil Rights Act because the outcome of the background checks is that a disproportionate number of minority candidates were rejected. Well, I mean, if background checks for employment are discriminatory, then denying people of color access to arms is likewise discriminatory, right? I mean, you can't have it both ways. And there is no denying that NICS disproportionately denies African American citizens their right to buy a gun. The overwhelming majority of felony convictions are for drug offenses, and while black people statistically use drugs at more or less the same rate as white people, they are much more likely to be arrested for drug possession, and therefore more likely to be denied through NICS. Compounding the problem is the fact that NICS will delay or deny your purchase if a person with a similar name has a criminal record. Now, because Americans of African descent were stripped of their family names when they were enslaved, it is much more likely for a black person to have a common name and thus be denied his right to buy a gun. Now, if you're thinking, that's just a bunch of gun nut propaganda, you should probably know I got this information from that conservative bastion, UC Berkeley.
No wonder it sounded so weird.
He's good at math.
That's racist.
By now, you may have heard that Dexter Taylor was convicted for building guns at home while living in the commie hellhole called the Empire State. His sentencing will be May 13th. He was not accused of any real crime, and he's done nothing wrong. But New York Judge Abina Durka proclaimed his Second Amendment doesn't exist here.
Don't you blaspheme in here! Don't you blaspheme in here!
What she is pure evil.
Now, did she mean it doesn't exist in New York at all or in her courtroom?
Unclear.
Either way, she's wrong, although you can't help but marvel over her audacity. She also instructed the jury they could not rule on the legitimacy of the law itself and threatened consequences for them if they didn't convict Taylor.
Do it or else.
She even interfered with Taylor's defense counsel's attempt to preserve these comments in the record for appeal. And there will be an appeal. And you know, I'm no lawyer because I don't think I'd even like the taste of puppy meat, but I get the feeling that appeal will definitely go Taylor's way. Judge Durko was so blatantly and unabashedly biased that her attempts to railroad Taylor are likely to result in his acquittal. But hey, it ain't over till Stacey Abrams sings, so please donate to Dexter Taylor's legal fund, which we will link down there in the doobly-doo as is our custom. And now for your moment of Zen. Hey friends, do you like pews and other pew-related things? Would you like to help us keep delivering you pure, uncut American pew propaganda at the low, low price of free fitting? We literally couldn't pay the bills without our sponsors, so do us a solid and get yourself something nice from them. You deserve it. I love you. If you live in Texas, Texas.